So, I've had my YouTube channel for a couple weeks now, and when I created this channel, my main goal was to share technical videos, so videos related to software engineering, whether it was me working on an issue at Forum, which is where I work, and we have completely open source software, so I'm able to share my actual work. So whether it was that or maybe something that's useful to the developer community. So, I really had the goal of, just sharing technical content that could help other early career developers like myself to level up and to learn something new, right? But I've gotten a lot of outreach from you all, my subscribers, and one of the main questions that I'm getting was how I got into software engineering. And so some of you have been to my blog, arit.dev, and I have like a short summary on there of my journey into software engineering. And a couple of you have also watched the video for the Ask Me Anything that I did with Career Karma, and I also tell my story there. But given the number of you who expressed interest in that story, I thought to do a video just talking about my journey into software engineering. And if you notice, I titled the video, Yes, Another video about how I became an engineer, because there's so many of them on YouTube. To me, that's not a bad thing, because I think the more representation we have in terms of that experience, then the more likely that, you out there will find someone's story to connect with and be encouraged by. But, I remember thinking, oh, there's so many of these stories, and now I'm doing one. Anyway, so let me start by saying that from my childhood, I had what I call tech foundations, right? So my father, he trained as a civil engineer, and then he went into computer engineering, primarily sales and support. And so through his work, we had all the latest gadgets, all the latest technology, as it was coming out and as those technologies were being adopted by banks or corporations or companies or firms, and as my dad was involved in outfitting those companies with the latest tech, we also had them at home. And so I remember a dial-up internet when it came. I remember, all these different games that, like, at this point, are so pixelated. I'm just like, how did I think that this was cool? We had all the latest video games, Sega Genesis, Nintendo. And so from an early age, I was exposed to technology, and I experienced the power of technology either to make life easier or to entertain. And so, in spite of that, though, I was resolute in my desire to become a doctor, right? And so, I have memories of treating my teddy bears or taking their, listening for their heartbeat and things like that. And so, really, I had my thoughts focused on becoming a doctor. And so I declared a biology major in college. I was a science student, throughout elementary and throughout secondary school. And so I think when I look back, I would say the first chink in my armor to become a doctor was when I survived my third year in college. And that was a heavy course load. I took several organic chemistry courses. I took microbiology. I took like a really heavy course load, which in hindsight probably wasn't the wisest thing. But I think my academic performance that year was such that was the first time I doubted my abilities. And that was the first time I felt like the things that used to come easy to me all of a sudden are not coming easy to me. And of course, in hindsight, I realized that the right response would have been to rework my educational plan, retake whatever courses I needed to retake. It may have ended up, with me having a longer stint in college In hindsight, I realized that that would have been at least one of the many options available to me. But at that time, in my immature mind, and might I say my proud mind as well, I took it as an indictment, and I took it as failure. And not just failure, but I took it as this is not for me. This medical school path is not for me. I don't have what it takes. And so, long story short, I decided to pivot into public health. In my mind, I felt like if I did that, I wouldn't be wasting all my science and biology education. And it was still sort of health related, but like quote unquote, not as hard, right? Because it was just a challenging year. And so I felt like that would be a good consolation career, for lack of a better term. And so I pivoted into public health. I got my master's in public health and, started working as a public health analyst. Right around the time I started that job, I got married and I had my son. And so that job was going great in a sense. I mean, it was cool that I was working, but looking back, I realized that there was so much about it that just wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't challenging, but it wasn't something I looked forward to doing every single day, right? It wasn't exciting. I felt so much of what we did. And so in summary, the company that I worked for, we were responsible for generating evidence-based reports to inform policies, the departments like the DOT and Health and Human Services, like whatever policy changes they wanted to make, we were responsible for generating evidence reports to either support or not support those proposed policy changes. And the way we did that primarily was through meta-analyses of research papers. So I remember it really became a job. It was like a job, it wasn't something that I was necessarily excited about, but I was grateful for the paycheck and I was grateful, for at least having a job. And so I worked there in that field for a number of years, and right around when the company I don't think they were acquired. I think they merged with a much larger company. Right around that time, I was let go. And so after being let go, in my mind, it was two things. The first thing was I was grateful to have the time with my son, because my son was a toddler at the time. And so I was grateful to have the time with him. But it also re-triggered that sense of failure in me. And the refrain in my mind was, you can't even hold on to a job in public health. And so I think those two, like being happy with being able to have more time with my son, but at the same time feeling defeated again, those two mindsets resulted in my decision to pretty much stay home and just be a homemaker with my son. And so that's what I decided to do. Now, I would like to kind of rewind the story a little bit back to college, because another thing that I picked up in college was, I remember it was right around when MySpace was reigning, WordPress was, coming out, and, these content management systems, and also these online community software were picking up steam. And so I picked up WordPress. And the reason for it was I kind of wanted a blog. I belonged to an a cappella group, and I wanted us to have like an online space where we could, post the minutes of our meetings or whatever we were planning, like our calendar, our performance calendar, and things like that. And so I picked up WordPress, and that stuck with me even beyond college. And especially when WordPress, I think they started more as a blogging platform, and they still are, but they hadn't really morphed into the content management system, robust CMS that they are today. And so when they started that transition, I was able to learn not just how to set up blogs, but how to set up basic, simple websites with contact forms and multiple pages. And so I always had that WordPress hustle on the side, even as I was pivoting into public health, even as I was working on my master's and getting the job. I always had that side WordPress hustle. And so when I was laid off from my analyst job and I decided to stay home, I had a lot more time to put into working on WordPress. And so I started building very simple sites for my friends, my family, and then it branched out. And then you have word of mouth and you have people talking about what you did for them. And then I started having, I guess, quote unquote, strangers calling me and asking if I could do the same thing for them, or if I could set them up for this, or if I could, put their business on the web. And so I started slowly having paying clients. And as the WordPress ecosystem became more and more complex and richer with plugins and themes, I continually educated myself in those things. And so right around, I think, 2016 was when, it occurred to me that I should formalize this whole WordPress hustle. And so that was when I established my company, or my agency, the Brace Agency. And I registered it as a business. I set up banking. I went the whole nine. And I started being very professional about the work that I was doing for people. I would write proposals. I would put the quotes. I was very transparent when it came to pricing. Anyway, and so it became a full-fledged agency. And I started building, or I would say assembling, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But I started assembling more and more complex websites for my clients. So I had clients who needed booking capability and, integration with their Google Calendar. I had clients who needed a way to sell maybe their artwork or their photography, through like a paywall. And so I started implementing just more complex websites and getting paid pretty well for doing so. And so I maintained that hustle. My son was growing up and then I had my daughter. And so I maintained that hustle, while keeping house, basically. Now, as I would say the needs of my clients became more complex, I found that the plugins available, even if I found a plugin that could do 80% of what I needed, the remaining 20% was still lacking. And that was when I really began to feel the disadvantage of not being able to code. And so the backend language for WordPress is PHP. And I found myself, trying to learn a little PHP, if just to be able to tweak something in the backend for a client's website that the plugin just wouldn't allow me to do. And that was when I began to really feel the disadvantage of being unable to code. And I began to feel very limited by the fact that I have these themes and these plugins, but they're not doing what I need to be done in order to satisfy my clients' requirements. And so that was, the year was, I believe it was 2017, but that was the first, I would say, thought of becoming a coder. It had never occurred to me before because everything I needed was kind of out there in the WordPress ecosystem. But that was when I first considered becoming a coder. And so after my daughter was born, I spent the rest of that year, taking free classes online. I took Free Code Camp, shout out. I took Code Academy, shout out. And a number of other free platforms that, introduced you to like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And I was, taking them and I was learning and I was excited. I was like, this is cool. Like the power to build the internet basically, or to build software that creates value for the end user. Like, that was exciting to me. But I think the combination of having an infant and then my son who's older and then family, and I just, even as I was learning with all the free resources, I never felt like I was making actual progress. And then I started to read up on stories of, other people who transitioned into software engineering, and I would look at their portfolios and I would realize I don't have a portfolio. I mean, I have a portfolio of my client websites, but I don't have like a portfolio that I can claim was my work. Right? And so that was when I stumbled upon the concept of coding bootcamp. I had no clue that there were these boot camps that you could attend for anywhere from 12 weeks to 6 months to a year. And the promise was they would teach you the basics that you needed to become a junior software engineer. And so I researched a ton of boot camps, and, nicely, a lot of them have what they call pre-boot camp or mini boot camp, and you're able to take like a week of course material, and it allows you to maybe assess kind of how they do things and, to aid in your decision whether to enroll or not. And I think I took like 6 mini boot camps in my quest to decide which one to enroll with. And I settled on the Firehose project. They have since been acquired by Trilogy, but I settled on the Firehose project for a number of reasons. Number one, their primary language was Ruby, and they taught Ruby Rails, and the Ruby language just felt so intuitive to me, just so intuitive. Compared to maybe JavaScript or Python or kind of the other languages that other mini boot camps had introduced me to. So that was one reason. The second reason that I chose the Firehose project was all the course material was already available through their portal. So the classes weren't live. And that was important to me because I really wanted the flexibility to decide how quickly or how slowly I was learning. And I didn't want the pressure of a cohort. I didn't want the pressure of a live cohort that if I was falling behind, I would feel bad about it, or there would be that pressure to catch up with the other learners. I really wanted a self-paced, 100% self-paced program because I knew that with the new baby and with my home responsibilities, I couldn't be certain that I would finish in a particular length of time. So I really wanted that flexibility. And so the way the Firehose project set everything up was everything was already in the portal, and you could go as fast or as slow as you needed to. So that was important to me. The third thing, of course, was the money. And so at the time, the Firehose project was $6,000. And when I say that, people are shocked because coding bootcamps now are a lot more expensive. And so, yeah, the whole course, it was a 6-month course, full time, meaning 35 hours or more per week. And it was $6,000. And I was able to get a loan. They had like some loan vehicle that you could apply for and finance the boot camp that way. Anyway, so I signed up. Oh, and I should mention another thing that I really liked about the Firehose project was the founders were very accessible. In fact, at one point, I wasn't even sure that I had what it took. And I spoke to one of the founders, Marco, and he basically told me, he was like, do it for a month. If after a month you decide it's not for you, we will refund a prorated amount of what you paid. That was very comforting. That was very comforting because it gave me like that safety net that if I decided it wasn't for me, I wasn't going to be out all this money. Anyway, so I jumped into the Firehose project. It was exhilarating. It was exhilarating and it was so frustrating. I mean, learning how to think like a computer, learning how to think in code, learning how to translate, this is what needs to happen, and you need to somehow translate that into code that the computer can understand. I mean, it was just a brand new experience for me, but one that I really enjoyed. I remember building my first application, which was a random quote generator, and just feeling so accomplished, feeling like, wow, like I built this. And so boot camp went on. One of the key things about the Firehose project was you were paired with a mentor and you met with your mentor once a week. I would say that was instrumental in my ability to complete that boot camp and do well. My mentor was and is Jeremy Friesen. Shout out Jeremy. We're still in touch till today. Jeremy was so instrumental in helping me develop the confidence that I could be a developer. And so my weekly meetings with him were invaluable. We would talk about, areas where I was stuck, or, a lot of times with the applications that we were building, if I had kind of built out what was required by the coursework, I would want to take things further just to test myself and to see, do I really understand this material? So let me give an example. So there was one application, we were building an Instagram clone, and the coursework called for us to implement like the original post, which we know, and then a comment. And so like one level deep. And I decided to go 2 levels deep. And that was me testing myself. Do I really understand the MVC model, model view controller? Do I understand the instantiation of instance variables and passing them, from the view to the controller and, to the model and back, like that was an amazing project. And so when I would do things like that and then I would get stuck, Jeremy was just so invaluable in, not just troubleshooting with me, but teaching me how to troubleshoot and teaching me how to debug. Anyway, so boot camp was 6 months long. And I graduated, I completed all the requirements. Another aspect of the Firehose project was they helped you, or they made you to train in algorithms. And one of the reasons for that, we know it's one of the key ways that a lot of software engineering companies out there are able to assess your technical ability. And so we had a lot of algorithm practice and algorithm training. And we also had career services where they helped us to set up our portfolio, include pertinent information. They also encouraged us, and this was key for me, they also encouraged us to blog about our journey and to blog about what we were learning. And so I started blogging on Medium, but then I transitioned to dev afterwards. And that was instrumental for me, which I will explain. Anyway, so bootcamp got done. And my resume was ready, my portfolio was ready, and then I started job hunting. Now, the job hunt part of my journey was the most demoralizing. And I say it with so much certainty because I think when you consider the promise that you can go to school or boot camp for 6 months and get like a 6-figure job right after. I'm not trying to insinuate that the boot camps out there are being deceitful, but it's so oversimplified. I think that promise is so oversimplified. And the reality is, or the reality for many people, I'm sure there's people out there who landed their first dev job even before they completed boot camp. That was not my experience. I think that the reality for multiple people is the job hunt is so frustrating. And for me, every time I got rejected, whether I was rejected after the phone screen or after the technical challenge, whatever stage of the interview process, for me, the hardest part of being rejected was feeling as though every rejection was evidence that I was not meant to be an engineer. And it was so easy to take it like that. It was so easy to take every rejection as, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're insane. Go back to public health. Go back to something biology. Your degree is in biology for crying out loud. What are you doing here? There's people who go to school for this. There's people who have 4-year degrees, 8-year degrees, masters, PhD, And so it was this relentless refrain in my mind with each rejection. I had coding challenges that if it was a live coding challenge, I would freeze. I would literally freeze mentally and physically. And I just didn't know how to go on. And then whoever was interviewing me would be like, oh, okay, all right, let's just go ahead and end it here, you know? And then, of course, you're going to get the rejection email. And so I started my applications in August of 2018, I remember. And the rest of the year was just an exercise in rejection. One of the first interviews that I went on was an interview at Capterra.com. And the recruiter who recruited me, Claire Johnson, shout out Claire, and she was just great, you know, and I mean, compared to other recruiters that I worked with at the time, I really felt that she really did want me to succeed. She wanted me to get hired. And of course, there's an incentive for her as well. But compared to other recruiters, I really felt like her desire for me was genuine. Anyway, so I started that interview process. The first round was a technical challenge, and we could solve it either in Ruby or JavaScript. So I chose Ruby. They gave us 3 days to solve the challenge, Wednesday, Thursday, and I was supposed to submit it Friday by close of business. By Thursday, I was in tears. I spent all evening Tuesday. I got the challenge on Tuesday. I spent all evening Tuesday, all day and all evening Wednesday, and all morning Thursday. And by Thursday afternoon, I was in tears. I was weeping. I was crying. I was sobbing. Why? Because I hadn't made any progress. And the code wasn't working. And it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And I remember again feeling defeated, feeling like a fraud, feeling like an imposter. And I decided to pray. I prayed and I spoke to the Lord and I said, you know, I need help figuring out, you know, I mean, I can turn in what I have and it's not working and just say it's the best that I could do, but this will be another failed, you know, opportunity. And the thought occurred to me that I was trying to do everything that the challenge required in one fell swoop. Why don't I break it up into chunks and kind of get all the chunks working and then stitch together? And that was the thought that occurred to me, or it came to my mind. And so that's what I spent the rest of Thursday doing. And thankfully, I had working code. It may have been refactored. It may have been optimized a lot better, a lot cleaner, but I had working code and I was able to submit it before the deadline. And, you know, I got the call that my technical challenge was good. It was, you know, it impressed the engineers, and I was moving to the second round, and the second round was to talk with one of the founders of the company. And so I did my research. I went on their website. I also searched about news. Like I searched news websites for news concerning Capterra. And so I went ahead and you know, I spoke with one of the founders, and the conversation, in my opinion, went really well. We spoke for over an hour, and I think the questions that I asked, for the most part, I could tell that, you know, impressed who I was speaking with. And so that second round went well. And so I was very excited to get the third round and the final round interview. And that was in person. That took about 3.5 hours. And it was a combination of, you know, talking, getting to know the engineers. And then there was like a pair programming challenge where I was typing on a laptop that they gave to me and they were watching. There was a whiteboarding portion of the interview where I was asked to solve, like, you know, write a function to, you know, to accomplish something. What I liked about this portion was they weren't so focused on the code, and they allowed me to pseudocode it just so that I could get my approach out and explain how I was thinking about solving the problem. So that kind of helped minimize like the pressure of the whiteboarding. And then of course they had the behavioral questions, you know, to kind of see how you work with a team. I mean, all in all, it was a great interview. I didn't even notice how quickly the time flew by, because it literally took about 3.5 hours. And so I came home. I touched base with the recruiter, and I was told that I would hear back within 24 to 48 hours. I heard back the next day, and it was a rejection. And it was just, I'm closing my eyes because I remember it like it was yesterday. It hurt so much. I cried. It hurt so much because to be so close to landing an opportunity and to have that taken away from you, it was very painful. And because this was one of my first rejections, I think as the rejections kept coming in, it really cut my confidence down with each passing month. My confidence that I could complete this career transition just kept reducing. And so by December of that year, I made a decision. And I decided that because I was coming off of freelancing, I had like a web development agency. And so in December, I decided that I was going to go back to my agency, and I was going to figure out how to use my new skills to broaden my client base, because I was done. I was done with the rejection. I was done with being told that I wasn't good enough, right? And so January rolls around, and those of my friends who are on my social media, they remember this. I created an ad for the Brace agency. I blasted it all over social media. I had never done that for my agency before. And I ended up landing a ton of new clients in January. So I was excited. I was starting the new year with all these clients, and I was feeling hopeful, and I was ready to put the rejections of the last year behind me. And so one fateful January day, I got a call from the recruiter that I had worked with the Capterra position, and she basically, said, "We have a position. It's for an early career developer. We remembered you, and we thought to reach out and find out if you're still on the market." Long story short, I got the job. I got the job the following day, and that was the beginning of my new career. I do want to say a couple things about landing that job. And I didn't talk with whoever made the decision to hire me, so I'm not speaking for anybody, but I'm speaking based on my intuition. When I got the call, the January, from the recruiter, I only had one conversation with one of the directors, I guess, of the engineering department in the company. And one of the questions that they asked me was, "What have you been up to since we spoke last year?" And I had last spoken to the team in August of the last year. And I really believe that it was my ability to answer that question with content and with it was my ability to actually have something to report that I think sealed the deal for me. One of the things that I did, from the August of that year till the end of the year, was I signed up to speak at a tech conference. And so there's an amazing conference here in DC called Tech Rebalanced. And it is a conference for women and non-binary people in tech. I found out about the conference through social media, and they called for proposals. And I had this crazy idea to submit a proposal to lead a discussion about breaking into tech. The reason why I laugh is because I was still in that process of breaking into tech. I didn't have a job yet. And so in my mind, I was like, what audacity to feel that I can lead a discussion about a process that I am still in and I haven't resolved in a successful way yet. but I enjoyed every process, and I enjoyed every part of the process. I was excited to get the approval for my proposal, and I ended up leading the discussion with another wonderful woman in tech, Sarah Catherine. And it was just amazing. We had about 30 something people in our little room. And it was amazing, and it was humbling. And I think it taught me that even when you're unfinished, there's something you have to offer. And you don't have to wait until you're finished. You don't have to wait until you're polished before you begin to serve your community, or you begin to serve your industry, or you begin to serve whomever is surrounding you. And so I think my ability, because I remember when I shared that with the director, he was like, "What? Like, you did what? You led a 45-minute discussion, and I mean, there was clear evidence of them being impressed, So that was one thing. Another thing that I was also able to share was I had joined a platform called exorcism.io, and I'm going to link all this information. I'm going to link it in the description below. But that platform was amazing in the sense that it allowed me to step out. So the thing with exorcism is you can participate as someone who's coding and solving challenges and having people give you feedback, or you can function as the person giving others feedback. And that's what I did. Rather than, be the person who was solving challenges and seeking feedback, I decided to give people feedback on their challenges. And what that did was it allowed me to mentally switch from being the coder to being the evaluator. And you can learn so much from evaluating other people's code. And so, during this conversation I'm having with one of the directors, I'm able to demonstrate that I haven't just been coding, but I have also been evaluating other people's code. And again, I really believe that was an aspect of our conversation that helped seal the deal. And so that's how I got my first job in software engineering. And it was just amazing. I mean, this video is about how I got the job, right? So I don't want to go into how the job was. That could be another video. And so I want to end the story by, I have said a number of things in the course of telling this story, but I do want to touch on a few things that I think could be helpful to any one of you who are still in that process of looking for your first job, or maybe you're looking for a better job and that has also proved frustrating. One of the things that I tell early career devs is you need to prove not just that you know how to code and you can create beautiful functional applications, but you need to also prove that you can function as part of a team. Not just in the relational sense, but also in the technical sense. And in my opinion, and this is purely my opinion, I believe that the best way to do that is to get involved in open source. Because open source coding or open source participation forces you to code in the context of an already existing product. The thing about personal projects is you are judge, jury, and executioner, right? You make the decisions, you decide what it's going to look like, you decide the features, you decide the functionality. Everything comes down to you. Like, it's literally your universe, right? It's not so in open source. In open source, there are already goals that have been set. There's a roadmap, hopefully, if it's a good open source project. It's already existing. Hopefully there are tests. There's a robust test suite that you also need to honor, as you code within that project. And so for someone who isn't yet working professionally as an engineer, I believe that open source is the closest approximation to professional work that you can get. And I think when you're able to demonstrate that you're able to, first of all, assimilate into an existing team, understand the requirements, understand the roadmap, understand the goals of that organization, and begin to make meaningful contributions to their purpose, that is invaluable. If I was a hiring manager, like, I would sit up, because you have effectively proven that you're able to function in that context. And so that's one of the pieces of advice that I really share with early career developers, or developers who are still learning, or still in boot camp, or still in the learning phase, is really give open source a good look. Now, I work for Forum, and Forum is the system that powers dev.to, which is one of the premier, if not the premier, software engineering community online. And so, shameless plug, Forum is 100% open source. We are always looking for contributors. You can contribute in so many ways. Our tech stack is Rails and Preact and a number of other things smaller. And we're always looking for people to hop in. You can contribute in different ways. You can contribute on the front end, the back end. You can contribute to our documentation. We are very documentation obsessed. And so we're definitely looking for ways to improve our documentation and make it easier to read and easier to consume. So you can make contributions in that area as well. But I definitely invite you, if you are looking to get into open source, check Forum out. Our GitHub is github.com/forum/forum. And I will link all this in the description below. But I can't recommend, I'm not just saying this because I work there, but I cannot recommend a more supportive and a more inclusive open source project out there. I really can't. Anyway, so that's my story. That's my story of how I transitioned into software engineering. It's been, and it still is, an exhilarating ride. There's no part of it that I regret. I feel so very proud of myself for making this transition. I'm excited to level up. I'm excited to grow. And not just for my own personal growth and my own personal achievements as an engineer, but I am really passionate about empowering others who are in this transition process or who are seeking to break into software engineering. I am particularly committed to helping women, mothers, because I am a mother who made that transition, people of color, just to improve the representation in the tech industry. So thank you so much for listening. This was a long one, but thank you so much for listening, and I welcome your questions. I welcome your comments. You can find me at arit.dev. I am also on Calendly. You can schedule like a meeting with me, calendly.com/Arit. I'll link it down in the description below, but I hope to hear from you. And I hope this was encouraging. I really hope it was encouraging to you all out there. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.